Hey, Val, thanks for joining us here on Voices in Transformation. I'm just going to jump straight in and ask you the first question, which is kind of ask you to put yourself in the mind of a chief supply chain officer. If you were a chief supply chain officer taking over a complex global supply chain tomorrow, what would be the first thing that you'd want full visibility on?
I'd want the panacea, and I think that's what's hard today. If I feel for some of our customers, depending on where they start and what's going on in the world, in the geopolitical world, and when you look at what's happening just across the supply chains, there's a lot on these supply chain leaders. They have the whole world on their shoulders, if you will, because their supply chains are complex and they are global, and they're more global than they've ever been. But truly, if I were stepping into their role, I would want the panacea. But the first thing I'd start with, I think, is just supply and demand across the entire network. So just trying to understand forecast accuracy and demand variability, and how do I really match that, where my demand is coming from my sales and the supply that I have. Um, and related would probably be my inventory positioning by location and product. And then, how am I doing fulfilling some of my orders, lead time and backlogs and all of that good stuff. And then I'd want to know, okay, now that I understand that, what is my network design and resilience? So who are my suppliers? And that's, I think, really important. A lot of times it's shocking when you talk to some
Yeah.
supply chain leaders. They don't always have visibility into their suppliers, or at least sometimes they may have visibility into their large suppliers, but they definitely don't have visibility into their end tier. So I'd want to understand my supply base, my manufacturing footprint, if
Yeah.
if indeed I am a manufacturer, and then my logistics network. So how am I actually getting my product to my customers, or how are my suppliers getting their product to me? So their modes, their carriers, their lead times, things like that. And then once I understood all of that, I just want to know, where am I exposed? So I mentioned end tier, but where am I exposed in my supply base, in the end tier of my supply base? Where am I a single source, regulatory compliance risk, and those types of things. Um, of course, how we're then performing against those things, but I'd really want to understand that landscape. And then, I mean, I am from the tech world, so I'd want to understand, how does my tech landscape, like my ERP, like my planning system, like my procurement and manufacturing system, how am I set up end to end to actually get that visibility, not just once? And so I'm stepping in and saying, give me all this data, but that data is not stagnant. It's not linear. How do I ensure that's coming at me real time across my entire value chain? Um, and I'd want to understand where we are there.
And you're right. I mean, that is the panacea, and and
Yeah.
and and I think, to be honest, that's what everybody wants. This isn't.
Yes.
That's what we're all trying to pursue, right? It's that holy grail
Right.
of getting that whole
Yeah.
end-to-end visibility, understanding of risk, looking at where my stuff is, and how the technological landscape can actually support that.
Yeah.
Speaking of technology and speaking about that landscape, it's a pretty crowded landscape. So what should supply chain leaders look for when they are evaluating solutions? And especially given that I'm talking to you and you're from SAP,
Sure.
where do you think that you guys at SAP offer a distinct advantage? And what is that? Why does that even matter in today's context?
Yeah. I think, when you say there's a crowded technology landscape, I think it's crowded in pillars, if you know what I mean. Like, if you look at planning in particular, like, there is a crowded planning technology landscape. There is a crowded logistics and a visibility landscape. And, I can go across pillars, manufacturing, and we can do that. But if you look truly at tech companies that can manage that value chain end to end, it's not as crowded as you think. And I don't want to mention others, but there's maybe one or two others, maybe, that actually
Yeah.
can do what SAP does. And so where I think our distinct advantage is truly in visibility that is actually propped up by the fact that we have all the data.
Yeah.
And, I interestingly enough, we had a new joiner for one of the best of the breeds in the planning piece. And he and I were talking, and one of the things that he said to me is, I joined SAP because when you announced Business Data Cloud, which allows visibility and allows you to build kind of agentic AI on top of that data that you have, plus bring in data from outside, which is a big change to how SAP thought about things in the past. He said, I I imagined what things were going to be like for me, not today, but a year or 2 from now, and I don't know how any company competes. And I think that
Mm.
that's true. So breasted breeds, I think, offer really strong capability in specific areas, and they may offer a really nice UI because they focus specifically on the end user. But when you think about the fact that um, supply chain is not about any one process. It's about the end-to-end visibility, and really that is all about the data and what you do with the data and the optionality that gives you to make fast decisions, and that the future of the UI is AI. What does it matter, if you have that capability? So, in a nutshell for me, it is truly the data and the AI capability that stands SAP apart.
And I know you've got a wealth of clients. You've got so many different customers across so many different industries, which
Yeah,
gives you a pretty unique perspective, doesn't
sure.
it? It allows you to, I know you have so many conversations with customers,
Yeah.
supply chain leaders today that are juggling disruption, they're juggling cost pressure, transformation mandates, and evolving customer expectations. So from these customers, what types of capabilities are they prioritizing most? And how are you at SAP responding to those pressures?
I mean, there's some red threads, obviously, across industries, when you talk about what they're prioritizing most, and a lot of it starts in their planning, how they understand demand and forecasts with their suppliers, and this visibility into that. But let me just take as an example, I recently was hosting a number of customers in life sciences, and I asked each of the chief supply chain officers to describe their supply chains in one word. And I'll tell you the most common word, if I like took all of the descriptions, and of course they didn't want one word, they wanted sentences, but we really got them
Mhm.
to focus on how do you describe it one word. It was siloed and fragmented.
Yeah.
And of course, if you're in life sciences, depending on which area you're in, many times what you're delivering to your consumers is life saving. So
Yeah.
they have a completely different view, and I use this because this is probably the most extreme case of um, what they do matters to humanity. It's not just about did you get your, cereal today. It's did you get the drugs that are going to potentially save your life today? And those have very restrict requirements when you're thinking about batch tracing or even how they're delivered, the temperature in which they're delivered, the shelf life that they have. And I think it just describes the perfect storm of supply chains and understanding um, the end-to-end visibility is just so important from them into their supply chains. Can their suppliers actually deliver? Do they know
Yeah.
and understand the demand that's coming for them? And can they deliver and tell their customers, or a lot of times they have co-manufacturers or co-manufacturers, um, are they communicating in real time and giving visibility into one another? And then are they very specific in the batches and the batch tracing and then when you go to how they're delivering it, there's the temperature requirements, a cold pack requirements. So do they know? And that's very expensive. So the other thing that we don't think about, we hear a lot in the news, I'm just using life sciences again as that example, is how expensive drugs are. But when you think about the end-to-end processes of actually delivering it, it costs them a lot. So they're very conscious on keeping it efficient. And so how do I ensure that my truckloads are full and the what needs cooling is cooled, but not everything needs cooling. So how do I really organize that and create visibility into my modes of transportation and what that looks like? And I think, these customers are looking to, when there's one change somewhere in that value chain, how do I ensure that I'm actually going to be able to deliver to my end consumer, whether that is, somebody in need of a life-saving drug, or as I said, even a cereal. And, I know my kids have their favorite cereals, and not being able to get it can feel like a life-changing moment for a, 10-year-old. But I also think that one of the things that some companies are kind of trying to get through is in their internal processes is um, the mindset that what we have is good enough. So if we don't understand our demand, we'll just save a bunch of inventory, and that creates a lot of costs for customers. So how do you really truly optimize and have that mindset that you should be running efficiently? And not only should you be, but you can be running efficiently based on the tools that are in front of you and the visibility that it can give you.
I want to move us now to AI. A lot of leaders are still figuring out what's real and what's hype. So, from your perspective, where is AI already delivering real value in the supply chain? And can you give us some examples of where maybe SAP has brought that to life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I always say it is real and it is hype, meaning I think AI is the one thing where we aren't yet delivering, anybody is yet delivering on the promise, but it is way more than a promise. It will get there. The transition is probably slower for most companies and people for multiple reasons, whether that is regulatory, whether they do or don't have the data to power their AI, whether they're comfortable sharing their data. Like, there's all kinds of pieces that we're working through to make AI the most powerful thing. So, in that case, are we delivering on the promise? Probably nobody is delivering on the full promise, but it is there. It is
Yeah.
working, and it will happen. It is not hype. I was just working with a customer who was telling me about the AI they put on their shop floor, where it records people on the shop floor and then it trains them for their own safety. Hey, we noticed you doing X, Y, and Z. You should be doing it this way. And it allows them to, constantly train and manage the safety of the people that are on their shop floor. That's like one case. But from an SAP perspective, and some of the things that I see happening today in generative AI. So, what we have directly into SAP's user experience tools like Joule, which is our AI co-pilot, it allows supply chain professionals today to ask complex questions in their natural language, like, hey, what's causing my supplier delays?
Yeah.
Or where are my top 5 suppliers? And it will receive actionable insights and optionality quickly. The net here is it's real. It's definitely real.
And to close, if you had to describe the supply chain tech landscape, today in one word, and I'm going to take that from your example. I like that. So, one word, what would it be and why?
I would say Symphony, and because I think it's no longer a linear process. It blends so many things together to create a cohesive, in a symphony's word, masterpiece.
Mhm.
That would be my word.
I love it. Well, Val, thanks so much for being here on Voices in Transformation, and hopefully we see each other soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.